For this surprise talk, we don't have My Little Ponies or firearms. We do take advantage of the Federal Reserve System, though. All right?
So you have money.
Well, we don't have money, but we can get some. We can get some. So my name is Brandon Henry. This is Andy Robbins. We work for a company called TrustCC. We are both pen testers. We also do security audits and all that kind of stuff. So the idea behind our talk today is that it is possible to extract millions of dollars from a compromised institution in a single day using the fundamentally flawed automated clearinghouse file submission process. You may also know it as the ACH system. So the goal for our talk today is to bring awareness to the flawed nature of the ACH network and its susceptibility to attack. For the past 2 months, we've been going through the responsible disclosure process with the main financial regulators here in the U.S. And we've made some progress. In fact, the end of next month, we're presenting to the FDIC down in San Francisco. So we're starting to make some headway, which is good. Let's talk about how money flows through the banking system. So typically, in the olden days, what you've got a customer, they go to the grocery store, they buy something, typically with a check. That business then deposits the check into their business banking account. Now, on the other side of this, the business has employees. So every payroll, they get a payroll check. That person then deposits the check into their bank, and that the way that these two banks do their settlement process is essentially they pass paper checks back and forth. In fact, in the old days, what they would do is either bundle up all the checks that go to a particular organization, drop it in the mail, or they would actually meet in parking garages with bags full of checks. And they would literally take a bag of checks out of one truck and then put it into another truck. So at some point, someone said, this is really inefficient, and there's these new things called computers. So why don't we take these checks, digitize them, and make it all digital? So in 1974, that's exactly what happened. That's when the ACH system was born. So on this one, you'll also notice that the employee is no longer depositing the check into their account. What happens is the business tells their bank twice a month, send the employee their paycheck, just drop it straight into their account. So ACH stands for Automated Clearinghouse. Couple of facts about the ACH system. It's a computer-based clearing and settlement facility. The two main organizations that process ACH batch files are going to be the Federal Reserve, or what's called the Electronic Payments Network. Essentially, they're processing large volumes of credit and debit transactions via these ACH batch files. You can think of one of these ACH batch files. Earlier I mentioned the bag of checks. A batch file is essentially one of those bags, but instead of a bunch of checks, it's got a bunch of lines in it. Andy will explain a little bit more about what that looks like here in just a little bit. So hopefully you guys every 2 weeks or so magically have money appear in your bank account for your payroll. That is the direct deposit system that's handled through the ACH network. Conversely, you don't want to have to write a check every month for mortgage, rent, insurance, all that kind of stuff. So you use bill pay, which is direct debit, also the ACH system. 20% of all electronic payments in the US are handled through the ACH network. So this is more than the debit cards, credit cards, checks combined. It's huge. Last year, it processed about $40 trillion. So this is about twice, a little over twice the GDP of the United States. NACHA stands for the National Automated Clearinghouse Association. It's the regulatory body that kind of manages the ACH, the rules and regulations. They also manage the electronic backbone of the network itself. So let's commit some fraud. Now, traditionally, what we've seen more commonly is that an attacker, someone trying to commit fraud, will directly attack a business or an individual. You can think social engineering. So I'm going to send social engineering phishing email to someone in payroll. Ultimately, I'm trying to get access to their financial institutions. And the end game is to redirect funds into my own account. So what we're talking about today isn't going after the individual business or the user, but instead going after the bank itself and then using the ACH system to redirect exponentially more money into accounts that are controlled by, I would say us, but we're not actually doing this, someone trying to commit this fraud. So let's go through a hypothetical attack. Again, I mentioned we're pen testers. We do this every week, every day. Let's assume it's a social engineering attack. We're not going to get into social engineering. I'm sure you guys have heard plenty of the social engineering stories. But let's assume, we do phishing, we do pretext calling, we do something like that. Ultimately, we get sessions on the inside of a network. So we now have access to the internal network. And again, we do this every week, nothing special. Every pen tester in the room knows what we're looking at right now. Okay, we escalate our rights to domain administrator. So again, if it's an account that needs to be elevated, we'll elevate it. At this point, you've been hacked, all right? In the media, you may know of it as cyber, okay? So let's turn this access into a lot of money.
Thanks. Okay, anybody scared yet? Anybody work at a bank or a credit union or anybody work at the Federal Reserve? Okay, so does anybody know what this is? Anybody recognize this? You may have seen this in a museum, or the last time you went to the grocery store and you were behind Grandma, she filled out one of these things to give the grocery store money. This is what's called a check. So a couple of pieces of information that are on a check. You have the routing number. This is the routing number for your financial institution, the routing number for your bank. Then you have a check digit, and you have your account number. Okay? Very basic stuff. We're talking 8th grade education here, okay? If you've seen the movie Catch Me If You Can, you're probably familiar with kind of the high level of how check kiting or check fraud, how that actually works, okay? So let's look at what an ACH file actually looks like. So here we're looking at an ACH file. A couple of pieces of information in this file that you may recognize from a check. There's the routing number. There's the check digit number. And there's the account number. You can think of an ACH origination file as a list of tens, hundreds, thousands of checks just in text format. Now the ACH file does have a couple other pieces of information in it as well. So in a check, you write down the name of the person that you want to give the money to. In the ACH file, you not only have the name of the receiving entity for getting the money, you also have their routing number, you have their receiving account number, so it's all handled automatically by the clearinghouse system. Okay? So a couple of definitions real quick, just so we're all on the same page about what certain words mean in the ACH world. A credit in ACH is I am adding money to an account. So I'm a bank over here. I want to credit $1,000 to this bank over here. Money moves from me to them. Okay. You have debit. An ACH debit is I'm telling the other bank you owe me money, so I need you to give me $500. That's an ACH debit. Easy. Now a batch. So the ACH files have batches, and the easiest way to think about this is, let's say you work for a multinational cruise line, okay? And you have offices all over the world, but you have a centralized department that interfaces with your corporate bank. So all of your accounts payable, all of your payroll, anybody who needs to send money to another organization, they're going to go through this one centralized office, okay? However, the way that you organize these in the file is with batches. So you're going to have your Singapore payroll batch. You're going to have your Austin, Texas accounts payable batch, etc. And then something else that we're interested in is what's called the file control record. And this is what goes at the bottom of the file after the thousands of lines of checks. The file control record, it has 4 pieces of information that we are interested in. So it has the total number of batches in the file. It has the sum total in dollars of the credits represented in the file. So we're sending a total of $80,000 in this file. And then it has a sum total of debits in the file. So we are asking for a sum total of $50,000. And then it has the entry hash. Everyone go like this and say hash. Entry hash. Guess what? It's not a hash. In the Notcha documentation, in the training materials for people who are engineering these files, everywhere this is referred to as a hash. Okay? So right here at the end of the file, that's the file control record right there. Let's talk more about the entry hash. Everyone say hash. In the file control record, this is the hash for this file right here. So how do we calculate the hash? Do we send it through some kind of hashing algorithm? What are we doing here? It's extremely simple. It's additions. You take all of the routing numbers in the file, you add them up, and that's your hash. That's it. Okay, so there's one more piece though. So if the where's the laser on this guy? Here we go. So you notice that the addition here it's only 9 digits. So whatever this sum total is, if it's less than 10 digits, then the hash is left padded with zeros. If it's more than 10 digits, everything to the left is just cut off, and it's just what's left over in the rightmost 10 digits. So what does this actually look like at a bank? What is a bank actually doing on their network, in their world, when they need to process an ACH file? They'll have what's called a Fedline workstation, and the Federal Reserve Bank mandates banks, credit unions, processors to have a single workstation that has a client-side certificate for the Fedline Advantage web application. You have to use an RSA token as a second form of authentication for the system. And sometimes the system also has to be locked into its own little room so that, Johnny in IT can't access the computer physically. Okay? Now, Okay. In about 90% of our client networks, they have a physical RSA token.
Okay, see, when I did this, it's been a few years, they may have changed, but when I did this, it was a hard token that had to be plugged into the machine.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah. Not like a pen readout.
It's not a fob. There are no numbers on it.
Right.
The hard token has to be physically plugged into the machine during the transaction.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
So
Yep.
it's a key.
Yeah. It's a key.
Of sorts, but okay.
So there are controls. So banks, they work with money. They're accountants, right? So they do have controls as far as, money shouldn't go somewhere where it's not supposed to go, right? You really wouldn't trust a bank that doesn't do that, right? So the person who is on the Fedline workstation, they need to look at 4 things in the ACH origination file. First, they need to confirm the total number of debits. So they get this information from the core application or the core server. They need to look at the total credits. Again, these are in dollar amounts. They need to confirm the total number of batches, and they need to confirm the file hash. Okay? If those 4 pieces of information are correct, and remember, we're not looking at where the money is going at this point because that's already been verified in the core banking application. If all that information is correct, upload the file to the Federal Reserve through Fedline Advantage, and then between 24 hours and up to 5 days, the money will actually relocate. Dollars will move. Okay? So a typical situation, a little bit more in detail. So you have a bank and you have a bunch of ACH items that you need to send out. Depending on the volume, what could be typical in a certain environment is that you do this all at one time of day. So at 4:00 p.m., the core banking application generates an ACH file, which represents all the transfers that need to happen that day. It will put that file into a SMB share on a system that is part of Active Directory, whose permissions are regulated by Active Directory. And I wonder, who has access to a folder managed by Active Directory? I can't imagine who would have access.
All the admins.
So, and then 15 minutes later, after the human being at the Fedline workstation verifies the contents of the file, they will upload it to the Fed. Okay. So where is the flaw in this scenario? It's pretty obvious, right? It's the file living in this SMB share in clear text on a file share where all of your domain admins have access to it, and we'll go into how easy it can be to get that access in a little bit. So we've written a Python script in about 35 lines that we call switcheroo. Switcheroo is what we're going to use to send money to us. Okay. Here's some output from the tool running. So the first thing the tool does is it changes all the routing numbers and all the account numbers for the account credits, or the ACH credits, to an account of our choosing. That can be one account that we choose, that can be multiple accounts that we choose, and then have mules set up to take the money out, whatever we want. Each batch has its own hash, which is again just the routing numbers added up. So we recalculate that so that it's correct, and the human being verifies that it's correct. And then we update the file entry hash at the bottom of the file in the file control record. An example of a real file. So the total debits, money that we're asking for, is about $400,000. The total file credits, the money that we're sending away, is $3.5 million. We can see what the old file hash was, and then using first grade arithmetic, we have the new file hash. And then we have the file control record, the old version and the new version. And then you're done. So we're going to collect $3.5 million. And we've changed about 3,000 items in this file. And again, the human being checking to make sure this information is all correct, they're going to see that everything is perfectly fine. So that 15-minute window, again, we're just interacting with text, so it's very, very fast. We complete it in 1/10 of a second. Easy, simple. And then in about 24 hours, best case scenario, the money actually moves. Anybody who has dealt with ACH fraud in your professional lives, you know how impossible it is to get money back, which has gone to the wrong place. It's a huge, huge headache. So who is susceptible to this? Who's vulnerable to this? Well, the big boys, the JP Morgan Chase, the Bank of America, they're not the ones who we need to worry about. The ones who we need to worry about are the people who are still using this manual process to take a clear text file, look at it, and then upload it to the web application. Okay? So in our pen testing experience, we serve primarily banks and credit unions, but we also have some healthcare, manufacturing, public education, etc. In a banking network, our success rate for getting access to the LAN with Meterpreter Sessions or whatever is 63%. In a non-banking environment, that success is 100%. And then once we have that access into the bank environment's LAN, our ability to escalate to domain administrator is basically a coin flip. It's about 50%. And typically that's undetected. Anybody who has managed Active Directory knows how easy it is to find where folders are and where files are in the environment. It's basic stuff. So we can always find where that file and where that folder is going to be. And then because we're a domain admin and because we're talking about a file whose rights are controlled by Active Directory, of course we can change the file. So we've got some kind of stopgap solution ideas. Really the real solution here is encryption, right? And not using clear text to move money around, right? So some kind of Mickey Mouse ideas. Encrypt the ACH file when it's at rest. Okay, simple enough. When the file lives in that folder where it's waiting to be picked up, very, very, very strictly restrict access to that file and very, very, very closely monitor who is accessing that file. If Jane in accounting at the Fedline workstation is accessing it, cool. If Charles, the domain admin, is accessing that file, not cool, right? Another idea is put the folder somewhere that's in a location not managed by Active Directory. Put it on a NAS, okay? The core banking system, it should only be able to write to that folder. The Fedline workstation should only be able to read from that folder. Simple. Not only that, but the Fedline workstation should be isolated in its own VLAN so that nothing else in the rest of the network can talk to it. This is basic stuff, right? But really, our opinion is that the ACH system is dead. It should be buried, right? So it was a system that was created in the 1970s. It was created for a different world, right? It's extremely slow. So when we're talking about money moving in 24 hours from one bank to another one, you look at the systems that they have in Europe and in Asia, and the systems they have, money moves from one bank to another one in about 30 seconds. It's extremely fast. And if you're talking about people managing investment portfolios and they need to move money from one place to another one, they measure their losses for how slow that process is in the millions of dollars because they're losing interest every day the money isn't doing anything, right? It's just floating around. The system obviously wasn't created with any security controls in mind. Everything that is implemented has just been kind of shoehorned in there. So with the web application, like having client-side certificates enforced, that's good, that's fine. But the core functionality of the system is totally broken. And really, it's just time for us to move on. It's time to modernize the fundamental way our economy functions. That's all we have. We have more content that we can go over, but I think we're probably close to our time. So there's a question in the very back. Well, there's not a person creating the file. What the system that's creating the file is the core banking server. So in community banks, these are going to be your Jack Henrys, your Fiservs, your FIS. So the idea here is set up the application so that it can encrypt and write the file to the disk on the remote share wherever it goes. It's not an actual person making the file. Okay, right here. Yep.
So I'm just curious, on my boss's terms, the core system that generates this output file, aside from this file that says move this here, put that there, so I'll take that from there, is there any other notification that money did not go where it was supposed to go, aside from business owner A yelling at screen?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
So there's nothing from core to core that says, hey, I'm issuing a file for 10,000 transactions and whatnot. Okay.
That's correct.
There is some other fraud analytics that can be performed on those files. Most of the fraud analytics is performed inside the core itself. So once it's in that folder, it's assumed the file, it's good. Not all of most of our clients don't use additional fraud detection analytics.
I think you had a question.
Yeah, so an attacker pulls this off. Do they have enough time to move that money around before they can pull it back?
That's a good question. So if somebody was actually going to pull this off, the way that we think would be the most intelligent way, based on what we know about financial auditing and controls in banking, would be not to put everything into one account, but over the course of a couple of years is get that domain admin access on a number of banks, a number of credit unions. So hundreds, right? Gain intelligence about, do they have a certain day of the week or a certain week of the month where there is a lot more money moving than the rest of the month? So payroll day, right? Christmas time, sure. And then kind of have what was it in Fight Club? It was Operation Mayhem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So choose one day and then have 10,000 accounts where you have, either the ability to take money that you're redirecting the money into a different account, and either have the ability to move that money into an international account, because you can't move money internationally with ACH. So figuring out some way to move that money offshore so that it can't be touched anymore by the US, right?
Because it takes days to get that money back.
Yeah, and
To get the money back, so right now, if somebody makes a mistake, or if a retail customer is breached and there's a fraudulent ACH request put in, and the bank doesn't do their due diligence on that request, right now, if money goes somewhere where it's not supposed to, it's incredibly unlikely that the bank can get the money back. So
yeah,
20%.
Yeah, and speaking of Project Mayhem, imagine if the script that we wrote simply took the routing numbers and account numbers and just randomized it throughout the file. You would have, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of transactions that went to the wrong place. And imagine doing that at 100 locations all in one day.
I think we got the signal for our time.
Yep.
Do we have time for one more question?
Well,
One more question.
okay.
You guys got the chance to, that wire system is significantly faster. Have you had a chance to look and see if it's set up similarly?
We're looking at it.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions? Come up front. Our time is done. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.